What's going on, guys? So we're back out here in the carport getting ready to do some work on the 240 finally after so many weeks. Little update on my hand. I'm getting the sutures removed tomorrow, and then I'm going into surgery to get my other hand done like in a week or so. So I have like a week window to hammer out some work on the 240. So I'm gonna try to get as much stuff as I can in this short amount of time I have. So where are we with the build right now? Well, there's a couple things I want to go over. The first thing I want to talk about is this brake booster here. If you guys remember, I was running the thinner brake booster on my other car. I decided to try to use this bigger one in the hopes that it would maybe resolve an issue I was having with a soft brake pedal. But after installing it, I found that, well, I don't have much space here between my wastegate and the brake booster. I've got a couple different options to explore. I could modify the dump tube, but even if I do that, it'll still be dangerously close to the brake booster. I'm most likely just gonna have to go back to a thinner brake booster. I'm really confident that the brake booster was a part of my issue for having a soft brake pedal feel. So yeah, there's that. I haven't really done much. I try to film everything I do, but one thing I did was tuck up this wiring harness that runs along here. I tucked it up underneath the radiator support here. Yeah, other than that, I think the last episode we went over the wiring. All the wiring on the front of the car is done. So as much as I would love to jump into getting the intercooler mocked up and getting the piping and everything done and getting the coolant and the radiator in, there's just one thing stopping me from doing all that, and that's the situation with this alternator here. Basically what's going on here is that this is a Quest alternator. It's a conversion that uses a bracket, which is basically like two Heim joints with an adjustable midsection. The problem is that the midsection, well, I don't know, it's kind of falling apart. Before I put my radiator on and my fan shroud, I need to go ahead and sort that out because I won't be able to get to it once I throw the radiator and everything in. I think that's what I'm going to go ahead and jump into, is getting this belt out of the way, loosening up the alternator, getting this arm out, seeing if maybe I can still utilize it. If not, I'll have to figure out some other sort of solution. Let's go ahead and get started on pulling that thing and see where we go from there. As you can see, this is pretty much ruined here. I guess, like on this side, you can see there's a locking nut. I guess at some point I removed it or lost it, and being that this middle piece is aluminum, it just sort of, as you can see, reamed it out. So this piece is pretty much trash at this point. Now I've got to try to come up with some sort of alternative for adjusting this alternator and kind of locking it in place so I can get tension on the belt here. I'm thinking I'm just going to take this piece of metal, drill a hole here to kind of secure it, and then drill a slot section here, so I still have some adjustability. And then when it comes time to tension the belt, I'll just sort of pry on the alternator, probably with a pry bar or something, and then just lock it down in place. Obviously this isn't the best solution. It should work just fine, and I think if I clean up this piece of metal enough and maybe paint it black or round the edges off nicely, it shouldn't look too bad. I guess I'm gonna go ahead and give this a shot, see if I can't make this work. So after spending some time with the angle grinder and some files, This is what I came up with. It's not perfect by any means, but it should get the job done and look somewhat decent. Unfortunately, I don't have any paint, so I'm just gonna hit it with some primer, and I'll probably find a better solution for this at some other point. But for now, this will be mechanically sound. It'll hold everything together. Another thing I need to address while I'm in here is the fact that my water pump is missing a stud here. No big deal. I have a spare water pump here. I'm gonna go ahead and pull the stud off this while I wait for the paint to dry on that bracket, and throw that stud on there, so I'll have all 4 studs in place. Alright, so for those of you that haven't removed the stud yet, this is a pretty simple method. You just stack 2 nuts together on the stud, get 2 wrenches, lock them together, and then you should be able to remove the stud by rotating the bottom nut. And there we go. It's that simple. Before you unlock those nuts, you're going to want to go ahead and reinstall it. This time using the outer nut, and then unlocking the 2. And there we go. Alright, so let's go ahead and test fit our bracket here, and looks like I'm going to need to stack a few washers here just to ensure that we have nice nice flat contact area right here. I have everything kind of bolted up hand tight. Honestly, I know this isn't super legit, but I'm fairly happy with the way it turned out. I'm probably going to leave it like this. This bottom nut really does most of the locking in place. Top bracket is more just as a secondary mounting point, so as you can see, it gives me plenty of adjustability. When I tension my belt, I will probably get a pry bar in here, pry it back, find my tension, lock this bottom nut in place first, lock the top nut in place, and then snug this bolt up. Now that we got this out of the way, we can move on to dropping the radiator in, I think. Got the alternator situation sorted out, got the stud and the water pump pulley, and now we're good to go ahead and throw the radiator in. This is a Koyorad N-FLOW radiator. I love these radiators. They're awesome. Let's go ahead and drop this thing in. I'll make sure both the rubber grommets are in there. There's nothing else I really need to worry about. And yeah, so we're good to go ahead and throw this thing in there. Alright, so after a little bit of tugging and pulling around, I got these brackets lined up. I'm going to go ahead and secure these with some zinc hardware. Man, this stuff just has such a good look to it. Alright, now that we got the radiator in, I'm going to go ahead and secure this upper radiator hose. Radiator is in. Moving right along. Next thing on the agenda is the clutch fan and fan shroud. It's right over there, so I gotta drag it over here, clean it up, and get ready to install it. After I get that clutch fan bolted up, I can go ahead and tension the belt here, bolt up my bracket that I made, and as far as cooling goes, we'll be done with the front of the motor. I got a couple coolant hoses back there for the heater core. I'm not going to be bolting those on because I'm actually going to be using the heater core from the other car, because there's some minor differences between Koki and Zenki, and I know my heater core is in good shape, and I'm not sure about the shape of this one. This car sat for a long time, so that's the plan with that. After we get this fan shroud in, we'll basically be done with cooling. Yeah, let's go ahead and pull this fan shroud over here, clean it up, and throw it in there. When you're installing clutch fan, you install the clutch fan and the fan shroud at the same time. It's like this on most cars. The point being here that if you install the clutch fan first, or the shroud first, you won't be able to fit the other one in. Okay, there's really not much to see here at this point. Installing these nuts on the clutch fan can be a little tricky. Having a ratcheting wrench like this really goes a long way for this job. But yeah, I can't really show you guys. Too hard for me to get the camera back here to show you guys what I'm doing, so we'll just cut forward to having this finished up. Wow, the engine bay is really starting to come along, man. Once we get the intercooler in and get the fenders and everything on, man, this thing's really coming along. I'm gonna make a lot of progress this week. Alright guys, so we got the radiator in, the fan shroud in, the alternator is bolted up, the belt is tensioned. Last thing I need to do as far as the cooling is concerned is find the coolant hose that goes here. I think I have it in a box inside. Yeah, pretty much cooling is done at the front of the motor. It's getting kind of late, so we're gonna pick up on this tomorrow. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to jump into tomorrow. I'm thinking I might get into getting started on the intercooler piping, but I'm going to need to find a hole saw to do that. We'll figure it out when the time comes, so I'll see you guys tomorrow morning. Welcome back. So it's the next day, guys, and I found my radiator hose, my upper radiator hose, so I'm going to go ahead and clean this up, throw that on, and we'll go from there. And that is it, guys. The radiator is installed. Upper and lower radiator hose is in, fan shroud's in, clutch fan is in. The belt tensioner worked out alright. I guess at this point I can go ahead and move on to getting the intercooler mounted up and start mocking up some of my piping. I need to drill a hole here, and I need to sort of open up this hole a little bit here. Make my marks for the holes, figure out exactly where I'm going to drill them. Make my brackets for the intercooler, and get that all bolted up. And then borrow a hole saw from a friend and finish it up later. So yeah, I guess that's what we're gonna do for now, is go ahead and start getting that intercooler mocked up on here. So here's the intercooler I'm working with. I don't know anything about what it is. I don't know the brand or anything. I know it's decent quality. It's not like a cheap eBay one. I don't even remember where I got it, honestly. It's a little bit smaller than your standard intercooler, which is fine because I'm not running more than 300 wheel at the moment. Later on down the road, I will be replacing this intercooler. I'm gonna wait until I get a bigger turbo. At that point, I'll get a slightly bigger intercooler. For now, it serves its purpose just fine. I'm gonna clean it up, straighten the fins up, and throw it back on there. Alright, so I straightened out the fins as best I could, cleaned it up as much as I care to. It's not perfect, and honestly, it never will be. I plan on replacing this eventually, and it's only gonna clean up so much. But for now, it'll get me going again, so I'm gonna run it. This is right around where I want to have it. I'm just sort of getting an idea of where it's going to end up. I have some brackets for the top. They'll work temporarily until I replace this intercooler. I do want to make some brackets for the bottom. I didn't have brackets on the bottom before, and it really wasn't as secured as I like it to be. So this time around, I'd love to make some sort of brackets for the bottom. I'm not really comfortable making the brackets just yet. I want to see exactly where all the intercooler piping ends up. But for now, I'm going to sort of start mocking up some of the piping, getting an idea if this spot is going to work, if I need to raise or lower it, get my top brackets on, and see what I can do about making some sort of solution for brackets on the bottom. Before I can mount these brackets up, these threads are actually quite dirty from rust and also the paint. So if I was to try to thread in like this, it would fight me, and there's a chance it could cross thread. I'm gonna go ahead and tap these holes out. Recently I bought a tap and die set. I wanted a tap and die set that had a large selection of pieces, but the Snap-on and Matco ones were very, very expensive. So I settled for this one on Amazon, Orion Motor Tech. I'll leave a link in the description. Obviously it's not the same quality as like a name brand like Matco or something, but it does seem to have a little bit higher quality tooling than your average cheap set from Harbor Freight or something. And it definitely has a larger selection of taps and dies. So a big problem with the cheaper tap and die sets is you don't really get all the taps and dies you need. This one has everything, and it's quite a bit cheaper than the Matco or Snap-on one. So I'm fairly happy with it. I'm gonna leave a link to this in the description below in case you guys are interested. I need a M6x1, and if you're not sure about threads or if you've painted anything, it's always better just to clean it than to have to deal with cross threading. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the other one. Alright, so I've got the top brackets bolted on here, kind of held in place. I haven't made the bottom brackets yet. I actually have been mocking up the tubing, and I got started on outlining the cut I'm going to do here on the driver's side. This is somewhat similar to what I did on my last car. I took a little bit more material out and made more of a square. Well, I guess I can show you guys. This is what I did on the last car. So you can see I took out a little bit extra here. I don't think it was really necessary for me to take this much out. So this time around, I'm gonna try to take out as little as possible, go for more of a triangular shape here, and if I need to take out more later on, I can go ahead and do that, not a big deal. So my plan is to hit this with the angle grinder, get these cut, but before that, I'll probably go in with a drill and drill a series of circles along this edge here, so it's a little bit easier for me to cut out by hand and really smooth out with an angle grinder or die grinder. I think I'm gonna go ahead and cut this side out and get the hot side intercooler piping finished up. I'm gonna go ahead and get the driver's side sorted out. Alright guys, so driver's side is done. You know, a lot of the times with these cars, I see that the holes cut for the intercooler piping looks really awful and really hacked up, and guys, it really doesn't need to be that way. So I'm just trying to show you that if you take a little bit extra time and plan your cuts out, smooth it out with a file and some sandpaper, you can have some really nice cuts for your intercooler pipe. Here's how it came out. Got that nice triangular shape I was telling you about. Alright, I'm going to be finishing up this hole with this stuff called trim lock, and it creates a really nice look, cleans up those sharp edges, and this stuff's really nice. You know, it's got a metal sleeve inside of it, holds its shape really well and grabs onto the edge. It lasts a lot longer than just like cutting a hose and sticking it on. I'll leave a link to this stuff in the description below. This goes a long way in really cleaning up your build. Small details like this really goes a long way. Man, that almost looks OEM right there. That's nice. Alright guys, so the driver's side is done. My neighbor actually let me borrow a hole saw to finish up the passenger side, which I'm super grateful for. But before I get started on that, I kind of want to talk about something real quick. So as I'm sure you guys probably know, I was pretty bummed to crash my last car. I put a lot of work into this thing. Basically everything I'm doing to my current build, I already did on this build. As bummed as I was to lose this car and crash it in such a stupid way, I'm finding doing this build that I'm actually sort of grateful that I'm getting the chance to do it all over again. For example, going back to my first build, as you guys can see here on this corner, this cut, you know, obviously I took a lot more material out of here than I really needed to. All this is hammered up pretty badly. The patchwork I did here is not nearly as good as my current work. It's kind of hard to pick up on camera, but you know, it's very, very rough here. Going back to my current build, sort of see how much I've improved on like patchwork and Bondo, how much better the paint is, how much cleaner my cut is, and just all the work in general is coming out much better. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that sure, it was a bummer to lose my car and crash it and throw all that hard work down the drain, but now that I'm getting a chance to build this car, I'm finding that I'm really improving on a lot of my skills, and just my work in general is improving quite a bit. So I just want to let you guys know, and I usually don't get really deep like this, but sometimes when something horrible happens to you, there's a reason for it. So keep your head up. It could be a blessing in disguise. In this case, it's giving me a chance to really improve on my skills and have a better, cleaner build in the end. That's all I really wanted to point out. Alright, moving on. Driver's side is done. It's time to get started on the passenger side. So for the passenger side, it's a little bit different. It's basically just a straight up hole. I was lucky enough to have a cool neighbor let me borrow a hole saw. This is like 3.5 inches. My intercooler piping is 3 inches. So that should be just perfect. I just got to take my time, really figure out where that intercooler piping is going to land, mark it, and make my cut. And we're just going to run through this thing. Alright, so passenger side is done. It's got a nice hole. We got the trim in there. Now it's time to just start the process of getting this intercooler piping mounted up, getting everything lined up perfectly, getting the T-clamps in the orientation that I think looks best. I guess I'll get back to you guys once it's done. So we got the intercooler mounted up. I haven't tackled doing the bottom mounts yet, but I got all the piping bolted up. Everything is bolted on tight. You can see I got decent clearance here. I could have done with maybe cutting a little bit less out here than I did, but it still looks great, so I'm pretty happy with that. Cold side is kind of a different story. So we're pulled up real tight against this headlight bracket here. We're also rubbing on the end of the frame rail, and the piping isn't perfectly centered up with the hole. Thankfully, this should be a pretty easy fix. I have a couple different options here as far as how I can go about this. I can take this intercooler pipe to a fab guy, have him extend it maybe like an inch or two, and that should rotate everything in a way where it'll line up a little bit better with that hole. But I'm thinking a better fix would just be to get a longer intercooler coupler. It's really coming together. Like, this is where like the bay is looking almost complete. We got our intercooler, we got the rad hoses, the fan shroud, all the wiring is done. The intercooler system is basically done. That should be an easy fix, no problem. I could go ahead and throw the headlights and fenders and bumper on, and I could call the front of the car basically finished. I still got to do the vacuum hose for the brake booster. I got to do the dump tube. I got to address the brake booster situation. I got to swap that up. I need a turbo elbow, install the intake and power steering reservoir, and that's pretty much it. We're finished up here. I'll probably tackle all that in the next episode. I want to be able to say like the front of the car is done. And then moving on, I'll probably throw the fenders and bumper and headlights and everything on, even though it's probably going to come off later, just because I have limited storage, and it'll be easier for me to have the fenders on the car than it will be for me to have everything laying around the house the way it is now. But yeah, we're real close to saying the front end of the car's done. After that, we will be moving on to the interior. I still need to gut the rest of the chassis harness out of this car and pull the rest of the chassis harness out of the old car. So yeah, that's pretty much where we're at with it, guys. It's getting pretty late out here. The bugs are coming out, so that's gonna do it for this episode. We really got a lot done, so I'm stoked to have made a lot of headway. I've got another week window of being able to work on this car, so expect a lot more frequent uploads in the next week, because I'm gonna be trying to hammer out as much work as I can before I have to go back into surgery and take another break for a couple weeks. So if you guys enjoyed the content, leave a like on the video, subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.